This podcast is presented by Castrol Edge Euro, the #1 brand recommended by technicians in Europe. Did you know that almost 50% of European vehicles in Canada come factory filled with Edge Euro? Offer better oil. Offer your customer Castrol Edge Euro. Questions? Contact your local auto parts distributor, or Wakefield Territory Sales Manager, or customer service at 1-800-268-5339. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Ross. Now, the issue of apprenticeship has been on the mind of everybody in the automotive aftermarket for a long time, right? But it's one that we struggle with. We struggle to stay up to date with it. It is one that is constantly on the minds of every shop owner, of course, and how to manage it. But But in the world of the apprentice, the budding tradesperson that we rely so much on to do so much work in the aftermarket, it's a question of success and prosperity, right? So, with me to talk about a new offering in the automotive aftermarket to help those apprentices succeed is Jeff Oakes. Now, Jeff Oakes is the automotive apprenticeship instructor at Conestoga College at the Guelph campus. And he has just published a new, I think, hopefully very valuable guide for apprentices, the Canadian Automotive Red Seal Exam Prep Guide. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. So, tell our listeners a little bit about what the prep guide is intended to do, and why you felt the need to put so many hours work into something like that.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for having me on to start off with. One of the things that I've been instructing apprentices I'm in my 23rd year right now, just about to wrap up, and I've taught all levels, all areas. And what we have here for apprenticeship is obviously government-mandated curriculum that we cover, and that curriculum covers the theoretical side. Now, again, it's not theoretical, but like the actual functionality of components, of vehicles, and we do bumper-to-bumper, front-to-back, mechanically, electrically, all of those pieces. What's interesting is once the students are done with us, then they go to the ministry and they write their Red Seal certification exam called the Certificate of Qualifications. The Certificate of Qualifications marries what we do with them under 720 hours over 3 years, plus the 6,500 hours that they work on the shop floor, and they write that into an exam those times, into a 125 question exam. So what the exam is based off of is a little technical here, but called the Red Seal Occupational Standard, which is everything an apprentice is supposed to complete on the floor as a technician at work before they write the exam. The exam is actually based off that document, but we teach them curriculum, which is not off that document. It's a version of it, but it's a lesser amount. And you can appreciate we have them for 720 hours, but their employer has them for 65, 75, 8,500 hours. That's what the test is based on. So what happened was a couple of years ago, the ministry decided to raise the exam pass mark. This is when I say a couple of years ago, understand I'm talking a couple of decades ago, from 60% to 70%. And we were having lots of people fail. So they made a preparation week at the end of their final level to get them ready for the exam. And we just didn't have any material for it. Like our exams are all based off of curriculum based, but nothing off the Red Seal Occupational Standard. So actually, Andrew, to be honest, it was just one of those things that I was looking at my students and I had a fistful of questions that I had got from various locations. I'm like, these are not the type of questions that are going to help them on the CFQ. So I kind of got a little burn in my saddle. And I sat down and over a couple of months, I went through every page on the Red Seal Occupational Standard. And if anybody's listening who wrote that, I appreciate that you wrote it, but it's very dry. And I wrote multiple questions for every reportable piece that was on the Red Seal, or the occupational standard, so that students could actually have on the floor questions that would help them study for the CFQ that were similar, not identical, but similar to what the CFQ writing was. So I test drove it with my students last year, and they're like, Jeff, why are you publishing this? And I'm like, well, I tried once, it didn't work. They're like, do it again. So I did it again. So I published a new book. That's my story.
There's your story. Yeah. I mean, I guess this is, I mean, and, you know, since for those, you know, maybe outside of Ontario, I mean, we also, you know, we've had a change, and we used to have the College of Trades, and now we have Skills Ontario. And so that, you know, the whole structure of apprenticeship has, you know, gone through a transformation as well. But it sounds like some of those disconnects between, you know, curriculum and, as you say, certificate of qualification examination is really, you know, something that you saw and said, well, we need to close this gap.
I think that's really what it came down to is the students just, they had nothing to reference when they were prepping for the CFQ. They would go through a curriculum, and then they'd recall back to when they would do stuff on the floor maybe 2-3 years ago, and they're like, okay, I feel like I'm confident to write the exam. But there's nothing really to, like, there's no acid test to say, if I do this, this happens. So that was the idea. So the book I put together, it turned out to be way more than I thought it was going to be as I was writing questions. So when I was done, I had 875 questions and plus answers. So I put all the answers in the back. That way a student can go and say, you know what? I feel like I'm deficient in maybe the drivability, or maybe the transmission section, or maybe the diesel or the EV section. So they can go in there and they can basically pre-prep themselves. And I use it with my students in class. We do 30 hours of prep. It's just a helpful resource. So I made it, if anybody else could use it, you know, it's available. Of course, it's on Amazon, right? But it's available to them, so they can purchase it.
Yeah. We'll put the link in the story in the podcast notes for anybody who's
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Interested. Yeah, I mean, the area of it's interesting to me, of course, from the perspective or within the context of what we're hearing a lot about, breaking down of interprovincial barriers now. You know, for, you know, goods and services and professional mobility, that, you know, those of us in you know, certainly in the aftermarket have had, you know, the access to Red Seal degree of mobility for quite a while. I mean, you've got a lot of experience. Is this something that you see as becoming more and more important for the apprentices and those moving into the trade, and, you know, as we go into what appears to be kind of a new era of breaking down interprovincial barriers?
Well, I would certainly say it's not going to hurt. Like, I think right now we have Ontario. I'll just be apprenticeship focused just for a second, and then we'll broaden it up to technicians. Ontario trains more technicians, automotive technicians, than I believe, I hope this is correct, Andrew, but I believe all the other provinces combined. So we have many, many, many schools that are teaching automotive. And the students do tend to meander back and forth, which is interesting because, on that note, Ontario is the only province that has 3 levels of apprenticeship. Everybody else in the country has 4. So what we're seeing now is with our new curriculum writing, actually, I'm leaving tomorrow to head down to do curriculum writing with Skilled Trades Ontario for the new curriculum. We are pushing for 4 levels. And that way, even though you're not even a technician, you could do level 1 and 2 in Ontario and maybe level 3 and 4 in BC, and they're articulated. So that to me is a win. But I believe right now, as it stands, the only province that does not recognize our Red Seal is Quebec. But anywhere else in Canada, you should be able to go with your Red Seal certificate, hand it to an employer and go, I'm a licensed technician, love to work for you. And you should be able to be hired on the spot, right. Ideally.
Right. It's interesting. Again, it interests me because, you know, maybe, you know, automotive aftermarket, I'm a bit sensitive to this because I've been doing this for, you know, 30 years, and we kind of get a bad rap sometimes as being a little bit, I don't know, traditional and behind the times. But in this aspect, we're really ahead of the game with you know, Red Seal certifications and the mobility. As I mentioned, in the context of the call for greater mobility, and I'm not sure that that gets highlighted enough. That there's actually quite a bit of mobility amongst the skilled trades in certain areas, certainly in the aftermarket, right? You mentioned Quebec being an exception, but hopefully we'll get them into the fold at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you nailed it. And it's kind of funny because Andrew, I think what happens here. So I'm in the walls of the college right now, right? I think what happens inside the college, in general, all colleges in Ontario, is that we kind of beat that drum. It's like you have your red seal. You can go to other places. You can go to different. You want to go to Nova Scotia? Yeah, go ahead. You want to go to Saskatchewan? Go ahead. Like you have that flexibility. But I don't know how far outside of the walls it gets. I don't know like if that is something that should be advertised more, the fact that you are going to achieve a license that is basically Canadian recognized and highly sought after in the US as well, because they don't have apprenticeship. So I don't know. I don't know if we maybe we're just poor at advertising. We think we do a good job, but I kind of think we don't.
Well, you're probably right. Again, in all of the talk about interprovincial mobility, I've yet to hear anybody highlight, whether it's automotive, automotive trades or any other as examples that exist. They talk about doctors and lawyers and maybe and some others, mostly doctors and nurses, but not so much, the skilled trades that exist today that have the mobility and maybe don't recognize, and maybe some folks who are working in the skilled trades now who have their qualifications, but maybe because they've been at it for a while, never did get as a red seal because of if they've had them for a while, but aren't necessarily aware of all of it, or even as we've talked about endlessly, the parents and guardians of those who are looking at the trade as highlighting this as being an area that you can have a lot of mobility within the economy, should you choose to pursue apprenticeship in the automotive trades. So to me this sounds like a super good story to remind people of.
Oh, and I think you actually nailed it there. And actually, while you were talking, it just kind of like a little thought came into my mind. I know, Andrew, like you and I have been talking about this for a long time. The shortage of quality technicians is so rampant right now. And I don't know what happened after COVID, but it seemed like half of our workforce vaporized. So that, even from an employer trying to get an employee perspective, now you have the ability to go out of province and still get a licensed technician that can work in your bay. You're not stuck in your province, which is, you should be able to find a technician in your province. But if you can't, like you have the ability to reach out and just go, hey, anybody out east, anybody out west, anybody north of us, any interest in moving to Ontario? One of those things. So I think it's quite a carrot to be able to dangle that and say, I have the flexibility to go anywhere. Now, we know what it's like. Family comes along, you get settled in a spot, you don't want to move, but it's an interesting aspect that you're right is, I think, underutilized in the trades.
Yeah, for sure. Now, sort of asking you to get inside of some of your, apprenticeship candidates and students now. I mean, what are they looking for? I mean, this is one aspect of it, the mobility that maybe not recognized, in the way that it should. But what other things are they looking for that you'd like to share and that might help, those who are shop owners and others working in the industry to help make their experience better and hopefully retain them in the trade for to a full fruition.
Yeah, no, great question. So, like I said before, this is my 23rd year teaching, and people have asked me often, they're like, how do you find the new students compared to the older students that you were used to back in early 2000? And, by and large, it's really interesting. I don't actually notice a massive difference in what they want, other than they want currency. They want the employers to have the ability to have current information, current tooling, and of course, Andrew, you and I both know that apprentices could probably be paid a little bit more. They want to be able to make a living so that they're not having to do side jobs all the time. But most of my technicians that I see, my apprentices, they really just say, we never get to work on this. And then when it comes in, we're like, oh, sorry, we don't work on that. Send it to the dealer. They really just want guys to be like shop owners, to be current. Put a little extra money back into the shop so that they feel like they've been trained well on components and they have new stuff so that they can feel, they can kind of brag about their shop, because most of the techs I talk to, yeah, they're employees, but they kind of feel like they're part of the group. They feel like they're part of the shop, and they want to be proud of the shop that they work in. And most of them are. But I think that's the one thing that resonates with me, is that EV training and just keeping up so that they don't feel like they're falling behind. And I think that's outside of money. I think that's what maybe drives people out of a shop, when they feel like they've hit a soft top end limit emotionally in their own mind. They're like, this is as much as I can learn here, because my employer doesn't really send us to courses. He's not interested in updating. I think that sours them more than anything.
Right. Oh, that's fair. I mean, I know that, in past conversations I've had with, apprenticeship candidates, certainly, you mentioned the area of electric vehicles and working on electric vehicles. And, it seemed, well, that's kind of, the hype has certainly waned a little bit on the EVs over the last little bit. That was just an area of great interest to the younger members of the the skilled trades, on the apprenticeship side, even on the tech side, is that, as you mentioned, being able to even say to their friends, hey, I'm working on EVs.
Absolutely, right. There's that sense of pride there, right? I think, yeah, when I see that, it's really interesting because, Andrew, like, this is well before my time, but I've heard stories of like sections of mass exodus out of the trade. One of the mass exodus was way back in the 70s, when they went to electronic ignition. The techs are like, what is happening? I'm leaving. The next thing happened like mid 80s when we went to EFI, and they're like, what's happening? And then the next one that I've seen is when they get pushed to do hybrid EV work, and people are like, you know what? I'm just not interested. It's fascinating. I wouldn't say they're simple to work on, but there's not a lot of componentry. You're just using your meter and your high voltage gloves way more than you ever would have before, but it's good work. And when you blend that with your internal combustion work, you can have a really robust shop and service pretty well everyone. And I think that's what my students are looking for right now. They want to be well-rounded. They don't want to be somebody who I just do alignments. I just do brakes. They want to know more. And the longer they wait, the more they build up those kind of emotional barriers where they get afraid of things and they don't want to tackle them.
Yeah, and that's kind of a whole other challenge. But I think it's always really interesting to me that we talk an awful lot about apprentices and apprenticeship in this industry. We rarely talk to them and ask them questions about what they want. Right? Am I right?
Yep. You're right. Yeah, I get the chance to do it every day, but that's just because of my job, right? It's unique. Other than that, you're exactly right. We've never sat down with apprentices and given them kind of their time in court per se, and just say, hey, we want to ask you some questions and pick their brains a little wee bit. Most of them are very excited about cars. My students love cars and trucks. They do. And they just want to talk about them all the time, almost to a fault. But they're passionate about it. And I think that I've seen this in the past, where just working at certain locations where, maybe attitudinally people are a little subpar, and it kind of dampens their excitement about it. And yeah, that's another topic we could go down sometime. But you're right. We don't talk to apprentices enough.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lesson in there for shop owners, right? To say,
Yeah.
ask them how they're doing. I mean, all of the information is out there on how to successfully, usher along, your apprentices that work in your shop. I mean, it starts with having an apprentice in your shop and being open to that.
Absolutely.
I think, it's only fair to state here that we on this side of the whatever microphones and that, we do understand that it's a challenge and an investment in time and energy to have apprentices in your shop. It's not nothing, but it's important to the ongoing success of your shop, and having mentors on staff, whether it's lead techs or other techs who are willing to do it. This is super important, making them feel like they're part of a team, and giving them interesting work. I mean, heaven's sakes, that's probably the biggest generational thing that I've seen. And unfortunately, I've got to go back a long time. 40 years ago, I can't believe I'm still talking about 40 years ago, it was about paying your dues, right? You got all the boring work. You got the dull jobs and the dirty jobs when you were an apprentice. And now, I guess, one thing that's probably true is they're just, it was never really the right way, if you ask me, but it really, you're going to lose apprentices. They're just going to walk, right? They'll be like, if all I'm going to do is get the boring work and it's not what it's been cracked up to be, I'm going to find another shop or even another trade, right?
Yeah. No, and that's exactly right. And I think too, with that along, and there is the element where obviously there's only certain work you can give to a starting apprentice, but to grow them up well in your shop so that even, yes, you have a great technician, but there is a pretty broad range of shop owners out there that you look at and you're like, do you have a succession plan when you want to step away from your shop that you've built up? And if they don't, why not build internally? Like, put the time and effort in. And yes, apprenticeship is a long game. Absolutely. And yeah, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to cost you money. It's true. But we were all apprentices at one point, and somebody took a swing at us and said, hey, I'm willing to train you. And you just never know where your life's going to take you. So these apprentices, they're important. They really are. And I think we're at the point right now where people are starting to realize you just can't find technicians standing around outside your door asking for a job. You have to build within.
That's a great point to end on. Building within, and a really great place to start is to make sure if you are I guess anywhere, but particularly I firmly believe actually that this prep guide is probably great for anybody working in the trade to use as a reference from the sounds of things, but also in particular those who are in Ontario looking to write their certificate of qualification exams. The Canadian Automotive Red Seal Exam Prep Guide by Jeff Oakes, our guest today. And as I said, we'll put the information, a link in the episode notes so that if you're interested, you can purchase same. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been great talking to you about all things apprenticeship. Some really great stories there. It's a really great story for the aftermarket to be able to have the mobility too at a time when, that interprovincial mobility of skilled trades and skills and professionals is top of mind. Thanks for being on the podcast, Jeff.
Andrew, that was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on. It's great. I appreciate all the work you do in the background. So keep going. Keep going. It's awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening. That's all from me. Hannah, take us out.
You're listening to the Great Canadian Aftermarket Podcast, brought to you by the publishers of Indie Garage and Jobber Nation. Connect with us online at indiegarage.ca and jobbernation.ca, a brand of Chat Integrated Media.